Cool. Dominic, man, welcome to The Rock.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Do you know what? Does it feel weird? Like, how long have you and I been speaking for?
Over a year. Well over a year.
No,
so
like
2, 3.
No, it's closer to like 3 years.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
It was before we did like Raion Live 2023. So
we're going back a couple years here, man.
Yeah. A lot's happened. Recently, just been in Singapore.
Yeah, I just got back from a UN session in Singapore. So, I had a couple business meetings in Munich, and then flew from Munich to Singapore, and then lapped the world last week, and then I'm back over here. So,
what were you doing in Singapore?
So we had a UN session. It was the second AI for Health Global Initiative meeting between the World Health Organization, the ITU, and the World Intellectual Property Organization. So, being the second meeting, what we did was we worked through some of the structural things we had to do. So we had to decide, all right, well, what are going to be the working groups that are currently ongoing with this new global initiative, and what's going to be some of the protocol there. Because when I first joined the UN in 2022, it was just a focus group. So it rolled into this global initiative in July of 2023. So, I'm kind of there on the ground floor of this, foundational moment where we roll it into a global initiative. And it turns out that the UN has been a really important part of my journey because it allowed for me to be able to validate some of the work that I do in ways that I wasn't able to validate through traditional methods.
How do you join the UN? I mean, do they reach out to you? Are you reaching out to them?
No, spending time in the south of France.
Is that it? You're just hanging out in the south of France?
Yeah, when we hosted the first annual World AI Con Festival, I went to a dinner with Laurence Cohen and Meta, and at that dinner...
So do you mind giving me a bit of a background to who exactly Jan is?
Sure. So Jan is I guess he's the chief data scientist at Meta. He worked at Bell Labs back in the 1980s, and the lab that he worked in and himself invented convolutional neural networks. A little bit of historical context, my CTO, Felipe Carino, was the founder of the intrapreneurial laboratory between Bell Labs, NCR, and Teradata that a year prior to Jan coming into Bell Labs was founded, and then Jan comes in and then invents convolutional neural networks as part of that laboratory.
And what's your story?
My story? Well, kid from New York, kid from Long Island. I never really thought that I would be doing this work or having reached some of these places. I think that when I was younger, I sold myself short quite a bit, and I just didn't know that this was attainable and this was possible. So, I grew up on a computer since I was 4 years old, developed a real passion for technology at a really young age. I didn't really realize how lucky I was to be born in 1991 and be one of the first people, really one of the first generations to ever live their entire life with personal computing, technology, the internet. So I got really into it in the 90s, ended up building groups and Yahoo groups and stuff like that and communities. And then my dream was to develop video games for a living. So I ended up doing a little bit of advertising in high school. That's actually where I got my first salary job. I was in high school. And then I went on to go to school for video game development. And then,
so what was the first salary job? What exactly were you doing?
I was selling banner ads on websites for...
How old are you at that time?
I was 13, 14.
So who are you selling banner ads to? Who are you speaking to?
People would send me money for ads, And then like they'd get me on the phone,
Who
and
were they?
they'd hear my squeaky voice, and they're like, "How old are you?" And I'm like, 13. And it was like, they're like, "Wait a minute, we just sent like 10 grand to a 13-year-old."
Really, as much as that?
Yeah, it was like it
Wow.
would go higher too. I mean, at one point I was doing over 100,000 a month in sales as a teenager. So I just perfected the messaging, the pipeline, the outreach, and I did really well with it. So after that, I stepped away from that, went off to go to school for video game development in Orlando at Full Sail, and which I just came from, by the way. So I did that, and then I went off and made slot games for a little while. Went back into the programmatic advertising industry, founded a company, and brought that to a top 100 business in a $50 billion a year market cap space. And then, you know, that industry had a lot of changing dynamics, so I decided to step out of it a little bit, and went into doing voice applications. I did real-time messaging systems for banks, and then I did.
How old are you at this point?
This is I was in my mid-20s, so I was doing like real-time routing for hazardous payloads, which brought me over to.
So you haven't gone to university. You've like pretty much learned this all yourself.
Well, I went to school at Full Sail.
Oh,
Full
sorry.
Sail University.
Apologies. Okay.
Yeah, so that was it was 2
How-
years of pretty intense. I got a 4-year degree in two.
Okay. Apologies. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
When you said full, okay.
Yeah, because
Wow.
it's not really like Full Sail isn't really known for the kind of work I do. So they're more known for like entertainment graduates, right? So be it in the music business or in the video game industry, a lot of people don't cross over into the enterprise space. So.
Right. I just thought you lectured there.
Oh, yeah, I went to school there. It was some of the most formative times of my life were, working nonstop. I mean, I would have classes till 1 or 2 in the morning, and then another class at 8 a.m. and 6 hours of homework. So I would go days without sleep and coding, and, that really beat the muscle memory into me to just work hard and perform.
And so, I mean, in terms of like your training, like you've obviously learned pretty much a lot of it yourself at a very young age. How are you learning at that point?
Ooh.
Are you going on YouTube? Or, I mean, I guess it's probably
Well,
too
this
early
was
for that,
before
right?
us. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of this was before YouTube existed, right? So a lot of this was trial and error. Like, a lot of my younger years where I was still kind of honing in on a passion. It was modifying a file and hoping that the computer turns on again. So from there,
I mean, you saw a dial-up at that point.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still remember the noises it would make.
Yeah.
So I mean, that was a big thing, and then obviously with the transition, it's been nice being at the forefront of it because I've seen the trend now of where things have gone and where things are going, and I've always paid respect to the history and to the people who have come before me that made things possible. So when you do that, you're able to really see the patterns that you need to see to be able to be successful at this.
We got Risto Mikalanen, who's flying out here. He'll be landing in a couple of hours.
Nice.
One of the OGs, I guess, of AI. And I'm going to get the chance to sit down with him tomorrow. And I do think what must it be like to? I mean, he must have been studying and writing about this 30 years ago, maybe longer, 40 years ago, and now to all of a sudden just see it all come to fruition.
Yeah, even for me, it's like a Black Mirror episode or something like that. It's really strange because when I first started doing it, there was nowhere I could turn to actually get knowledge on it. Right? It was very off in the corner, isolated.
I'm talk about that. So and I think you and I have discussed this. It's obviously a lot of people say building a company can be very lonely. The reality is that when you've got visionary, revolutionary ideas like what you've got, right, and some of the technology you showed me a few years ago is just crazy.
Yeah.
Right? Like what you wanted to build, how you would wanted to build it rather. No one was doing it, and my story probably better than most. It's very painful when you're going through those early stage years and everyone is just ignoring you and thinking and especially when you've had a lot of success, right? And then all of a sudden, everyone's like, no, AI, like, what the hell are you talking about? This is crazy.
Well, I mean, for me, I've used it as fuel. I think that most entrepreneurs who are building something, they really need to go through pain and suffering, because the pain and suffering adds beauty to the journey, and it allows for you to find purpose in the work that you do, right? So, in my journey, I started this because I had a man who, you know, graciously gave me an opportunity to actually chase my dreams, and I lost him in 2022, and um, as a result of losing that person, who I loved like a uncle or a grandfather, and losing him in my arms, it forced me to have to dig deep internally and find meaning that was far deeper than getting feedback from the general public, right? So it became less about looking outward for approval, and it became more about how do I feel internally, and how I work through this, because and the whole process when you're creating something is really a process of manifestation, right? So you come up with an idea, and then you're manifesting that idea, and you're bending reality until that idea comes to fruition. And that's actually something I learned quite well a couple miles east of us, right?
Not that far
In
away.
Cannes. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that far away. Tell us about Cannes. Like, what? I mean, again, it's a beautiful part of the world. How did you end up there?
Wow. So 2021, we had just hired my CTO, Felipe Carino, who's the former chief architect at Teradata. And I got contacted by um, pretty much, combination of like the French government and a couple of groups within France. And they're like, hey, we're going to start hosting this new thing called the World AI Con Festival. It's the first time they've ever done it. They were planning to do it in 2021, but it got pushed back because of COVID. And I would say within 2 or 3 weeks of them contacting us, my angel investor was like, take the money and go. Like, you have proved yourself up. We're going to go do this. And so 2022 rolls around in April. We decided to go take part in the World AI Con Festival. And it was the first time that I had ever gone to another country and seen my logo like on a bus stop, or like seen my logo on a building.
And it's a great logo.
Thanks, but it was like it brought me to tears. And every time I see it, still to this day, like every time I go somewhere else where like it's a foreign culture or foreign place, and I see my logo, it has that same feeling of like, wow, you know. But that place in particular was really special that first year, because we met with Jan Cohen. We had a dinner there, which was actually a recruiting dinner because they were trying to hire me, and the that was my first major keynote, which I was like a puppy then, as far as speaking, right? So I was sweating bullets and somehow managed to work my way through it. But I had such a solid understanding of the topics that when I was done, people just flooded me, and we had a crazy booth. I mean, normally we do a crazy booth there every year. It was like a 30 by 15 that's in the rotunda in Cannes, surrounded by all of the biggest and most valuable companies on the planet. And it has yielded some great results for us as a business. I mean, it allowed for me to grow. It introduced me to the UN. It just has added up quite a bit.
And you also get approached by quite a lot of governments. What would be your advice to any government that is now looking at the transformation that we're seeing and going, okay, we're now getting left behind? How do they jump into it?
Well,
Or sorry, do they jump into it, or is it something whereby you've got to be like, have you actually just missed the opportunity?
there's a catch-22, I think. So if you look at what's happening in America and you compare it to Europe, right? I think that what people tend to normally do is they'll look at just the surface level of the results and they don't really understand the dynamics of what's creating the result, right? So, like in America, the lack of legislation that we've had for years has allowed for innovations to take place because people can iterate and try things faster without having to worry about the red tape. Whereas in Europe, there being red tape has allowed for large companies to be able to adopt the technology a whole lot faster, right? So a lot of my customers in Europe, they're adopting the technology faster than in America because there's less risk associated to them purchasing a software and putting it in their architecture because they know that they're not going to get, fined or sued because all they have to do is follow a predefined framework, right? So I think countries need to really decide what part of that split they want to be on, right? Do you want to be the innovator or do you want to be the implementer, right? So if you want to enable implementation for your country, you have to have legislation. But if you want to innovate and you want to iterate fast, then less less red tape is better. Now, from there, then you have to really kind of decide first off what your national data privacy policies are going to be, right? Because now you have this new relationship between consumer data and AI, right? And like in America, we don't actually have a national data privacy policy. It's kind of left up to the states. So, there needs to be some more work there so that we can better define that at a national level. Like, there's no GDPR in America. You have states that have done it, like CCPA in California.
I mean,
So
how influential is GDPR? Like really, like in a world with AI.
huge, huge. I happen to actually know the godfather of GDPR, Paul Nemitz, good friend of mine, and he's been a mentor of mine
He's the one
in diplomacy,
So, yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But when I think about what the relationship is between GDPR and the EU AI policy that's been pushed into law now, it's threaded very closely because you have how you source data and how you store data and how that data gets then moved into training an AI model, right? And we've seen a lot of political contention in between American companies and Europe as the European Commission. And a lot of that political tension has come from the fact that American companies will come to Europe, expect to do business here, and not make the investment in compute infrastructure that they're required to by law, right? So what GDPR does and what the European Data Protection Supervisor's Office does is it requires that when an American company comes here, they make investments in the particular countries where they're servicing customers, be it having servers, paying for services, helping to uplift the economies that they operate in. But instead, what's kind of happened traditionally is these big tech companies will come in and rape and pillage the data of Europeans and then pull it out and bring it to America and compute it and store it. And that's a direct violation of pretty much the basis of all data privacy laws.
But if you're the ones who are innovating, you can circumnavigate that. And I think that's my frustration, right? Like, this side of the Atlantic, like, there are some smart people, right, in Europe, and I just wonder why we're not innovating more.
Yeah, I mean,
well, if you had to choose, okay, for America, if you had to choose, right, between innovate or regulate,
yeah.
and you could only pick one, which one would you go with?
Well, for me, like as a business owner,
no, for America.
Oh, for America,
yeah.
I think that there needs to be a mix of both. There really does for everybody. I know for me in particular, doing business in America has been made a lot harder because we don't have those. We don't have the legislation in place. So when I come to Europe, I get customers that are willing to throw money at me. Whereas back home, there's a lot of hesitancy, and there's also a lot of misspoken facts because people are just selling snake oil 90% of the time.
I saw it with crypto, which is crazy.
And we're in that same kind of hype
Sure.
cycle now for AI.
Isn't it weird how we saw, and I don't know how you feel about it, but resentful is too harsh a word, but you and I were like working in this industry like way before it was commercially viable, way before there was like money being thrown at it. I don't know how you feel about it, but I felt like every crypto company 2-3 years ago just thought, "Do you know what? Sod it, let's just rebrand. Let's just call ourselves an AI company."
It's kind of happened that way. And the same people who kind of grifted in that space are now grifting in this one,
Sure.
right? And even at the very top of, where they consider some of these leaders in the AI space, I mean, these guys are making comments that are so antithetical to like the real facts that it sometimes, even for me, it's hard to really listen to because it frustrates me.
That's my point, though. So, like with a company like Drainpipe, when you think about what it is that you're doing, like how do you sit above the noise? How do you stand out?
Well, first off, I stand out by actually setting the trend, right? So, like when I go out and I do something, usually other people follow me, or usually other people are trying to do the same thing within weeks or within months, right? Um, then I also actively engage with policymakers in ways that nobody else does. So I find myself in Europe at like ETH Zurich at the Global AI Policy Summit at ETH Zurich
You got to come
um,
to Rome this year.
annually. Yeah, of
You went over the
course.
Human Economic Forum. Honestly, it was really impressive.
I would love to.
Like it was the just the caliber of people there, and I've got to say, like the Italians, they are
Yeah.
seriously smart people.
Oh yeah, I love the Italians too. I'm Italian myself, so it's like going home
Romano,
every time. Yeah.
yeah,
Hey,
of course,
Dominick
yeah,
Romano.
yeah. Where's your family originally from in Italy? Do you know?
Yeah, so they're from a town called Lorenzana, and they're from Sicily. So Lorenzana is southern Italy, just north of Calabria, and then they're from Sicily. And so my other family's from further north in Europe. But I just recently went down there after speaking in Milan in October, and took the train from Milan all the way down to Reggio Calabria, and loved it. It was like a homecoming. It smelled like these smells that I haven't smelled since I was at my great grandparents' house as a kid. The bakeries and whatnot. And then I had my first opportunity to go to Sicily by ferry in transition to Malta, where I took a ferry from Sicily to Malta, and then I fell in love with Malta. And that's become really my focal point now for how I funnel business from Europe. It's pretty much going to go there.
Tell me about that, because obviously in Gibraltar, they've got this track record of success.
Yeah.
We're now seeing like places like Malta obviously doing like incredibly well. Like, what is it you're seeing in these places where you're going, do you know what? Actually, that's the opportunity.
So I think where where places like Gibraltar, where places like Malta, where places like Switzerland have made tremendous gains is in the neutrality that they've had, right? So number one, having neutrality. Number two, having these like world class programs to drive economic investment in their countries, right? So, in particular, Switzerland has had, they've had a history dating back to the religious wars on these lands that has maintained neutrality, going back to when they protected the Protestants, right? So then when you look at like Malta kind of came and decided to shape their policy around that ideology, and that ideology now has brought tremendous economic investment into their country, and they're willing to make investment in people who are willing to make investment in them, right? So they're willing to relocate people from Europe. They're willing to, salary match there's all these different things there where they want people to come and feel like family, and that's quite attractive. Gibraltar has had a tremendous history of some of that as well. As far as attracting investment, and attracting.
They've done really well,
Yeah.
with gaming, like crypto, like DLT.
And it's all the same stuff with Malta too, right? So like
Yeah.
Malta does really well with gaming.
Sure.
They do really well with crypto.
That's
so it's
the
the
thing.
same.
I think for these small, and I like it, like these neutral jurisdictions. I think that's a really nice way to look at it.
Yeah.
They're just very business friendly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think like the challenge is like, how do you always stay like one step ahead?
Yeah. But I think a lot of that is, when you have a small enough market like, Gibraltar and Malta have, you're able to evolve
Sure.
faster because you
Yeah.
don't have as much red tape, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so
But you
they're
also have
able to
small
stay ahead.
populations.
Yeah.
I look at Gibraltar and I say to Jan, we can just retrain like the entire population, right? It's like one department at Microsoft in Seattle, just retrain the whole country.
Yeah.
And I think for me that's the exciting part, because once you've actually got these populations, the locals actually learning how to like prompt AI agents, the world is your oyster.
Yeah. And that's this whole new wave that's kind of unfolding in front of us is in many respects, we're going to start seeing multiples applied to national GDPs just because a small percentage of that population is able to be more effective workers, right? So if you have 20% of a population, or let's say 15% of a population that is proficient in AI, and every day they do the work or they have the economic output of 5 people, well, now you're going to start seeing multiples applied to the GDP, where it's going to grow extremely fast because people are able to do more in the short time they have, from 9 to 5.
So that's really why we're here. I'm looking at it, and I was just just to give a bit of context to those that don't know. Obviously, like I've always said that America, Florida has largely been our North Star, and I think in terms of like scaling up like thousands of people, that's really like the best people in the world, the most innovative, the most creative are in the United States, right? That's I'm happy to be wrong on it, but I don't think I am, right? I think the best companies, the best problem solvers, are all in the United States. But at the same time, I think that small countries, small populations have just got the most phenomenal opportunity, right? And I think that as long as you get government spending under control, like with any country, by the way, like to be clear, like I look at it as GDP per capita minus government spending, and I think that's like the future way of looking at it. And in fact, it's how you guys are looking at it or starting to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's
$27
really
million on random crap,
exciting. Don't even mention what it is.
Oh look, are we not allowed to? We're not allowed to talk about this man here, or no, yeah, I'm not going to mention what it is actually. Yeah, why make it harder for the editors?
Please.
But it's crazy. Like when you think about like what's been going on in the US, and then all of a sudden you look at like transformative technology like artificial intelligence, and you go, do you know what? Like, I think it's unfair to say, people are just going to easily go out there and build businesses. It's going to get harder in many ways, and you definitely risk like just creating this like huge wealth gap, but also a time gap, right? Where all of a sudden you have people that are using these AI agents, AI tools, and again, I'm not going to mention what website, but there are certain websites that are allowing people to probably work 20 minutes a day, and they're earning $5 million a month, which is insane. But I think that the biggest challenge in the future is probably going to be the time gap, right? I think that as long as you guys get manufacturing under control, and I think you will, I think it's going to be a good thing for the world. But I just think that if you're not learning how to prompt AI tools, I shouldn't even say prompt AI tools. If you're not learning how to use AI agents, you're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah, and then what also has been complicating the situation a little bit in America has been we're in the middle of this period where the old guard is kind of changing, and now you have new power that's coming in to, influence government. And even though you have a capitalist market in America, that doesn't mean that there isn't anti-capitalist behavior that make a capitalist market very difficult or untenable to be able to operate in. And so, when you have big companies that are coming in and they're, when you have all the investors that actually built up that company and made it what it is because they decided to put money into it, now all of a sudden those investors that should have diversified their risk portfolio, they're all kind of panicking now because they're starting to see that they put all this money into something where they were all hugging a bucket of water. And due to the commoditization of AI with open source models like DeepSeek and Llama and a couple of others like Mistral here in Europe, now all of a sudden the people who are standing in a desert hugging a bucket of water are now literally in an ocean holding that same bucket of water. And that bucket of water isn't as valuable as it once was. And so, it creates this weird dynamic where the traditional VCs that would want to invest in something that's different because it's diversifying their risk portfolio, now all of a sudden they don't want to because it could actually dramatically decrease the value of their golden gooses.
I don't think the VCs know. Like,
They do. They do. They panic. They're panicking.
Oh no, sorry. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Apologies. I'm saying, sorry. To be clear, like, I know they're panicking. I'm saying that I think that they don't know what to invest in. They have no way of knowing what's bullshit and what's not.
Because it's been primarily, the Silicon Valley that once was when Steve Jobs was alive is now dead, right? So when Steve Jobs was around, that was the capital for your deeply intellectual minds and your rebels and people who wanted to change the world. And now it's the different Silicon Valley that's more about appeasing Wall Street than it is about actually innovating. And now you have this like incestual web kind of where these people only deal amongst themselves. And if you're coming as an outsider that has something that's unique and has something that's different, and even if you have some of the biggest customers in the world, they don't want to hear it because they're just like, we're going to only operate in our little cabal over here. And that's actually dangerously, it's catastrophically dangerous for the U.S. economy because now we're taking all of this supposed risk capital and we're putting it into 5 companies when it should be far more diversified. And because it's not diversified enough, we're seeing now like China come out with these open source models, which are blowing the 5 out of the water.
Okay, so is DeepSeek actually? I'm going to ask you: is DeepSeek as good as everyone says it is?
Yeah.
But I was going to say that, and I think you hit on the interesting thing here is like with products like OpenAI, when it came out, what was it? December 1st, 2022 was when first time we saw it. I don't think at the time we realized that, and Alex Karp said this in the Technological Republic, right? LLMs are the commodity. It's about what you build on top of the LLMs, right?
Oh.
So with that said, like with DeepSeek, like what does give it the advantage that so many people are saying that it actually has?
Well, number one, all right, so the relationship that people have with service providers traditionally, right? So if you look at the historical context, traditionally you would have a relationship with a service provider where you're paying for this service that might be a platform, what have you. You're paying monthly for it, and your data is your data, right? So you're not paying with your data. You pay with cash, and your data is yours, right? And you're utilizing the service. What has started to kind of silently happen in the last couple of years is that now when you're using these providers, like in OpenAI, and others, particularly like, when you're using Grok, you're not just paying for the the service with cash, you're paying for it with your data. So now you're paying for it with two different things. And all of a sudden now, due to open source models, you don't have to actually give up your data, right? So when you're working on data that's deeply confidential or proprietary, you don't want to send that data to a third party API so that all of a sudden now it goes outside of your user access scope, right? So when you think about this from a cybersecurity standpoint, if you have a boundary of where your data is allowed to go, if you take that data from here and you throw it into the third party, well, now you have no way to control how that data is used. And that's a big problem. And that problem is entirely mitigated by having local models or having open source models where you can take your proprietary data and put it into that model and nobody has to know anything about it. And by the way, it's cheap. I mean, it's cheap. It runs on your hardware. So yeah, it might take a little bit longer, but if you have, a good GPU, it's quite fast. So
Why aren't more companies talking about this? Because you have the big guys who are, I think, are communicating very clearly about the opportunity, but also the challenges. But then there's all the professional services industries, the consultancies, the Accentures, the McKinseys, the Deloittes. Like they seem to have gone like very quiet during this time.
I love like companies like Deloitte and your McKinseys, and they all have a role to play in how they package up new innovation and sell it to really large agencies or companies or governments, but they're not innovating. They even 2 years ago, they were repackaging Llama and selling it off as government GPT this, government GPT that, and there hasn't been enough innovation in the space, and a lot of that is just due to a lack of forward thinking, and really honing in on deep subject matter expertise on a particular topic, right? Um,
One of them actually came
yeah,
to us a couple of years ago, and they were like, "We want to get into AI," and I was like, "What does that even mean?" You know?
yeah.
And that's crazy because they've still got people at the helm of these companies that are just lost on actually like what to do and like where to focus.
Yeah.
I've got to ask, hey, you're not too hot in here, are you?
No.
You're just like, okay, we're good.
No.
I was gonna say it's it's pretty hot in here, isn't it?
Well, it's a crazy
it's fine.
conversation too.
No, yeah. But look, like, well, with regards to the consultancies, with regards to the professional service industries, like, are we gonna see this like M&A period where all of a sudden you have like the consultancies, you have like the law firms, the accountancies, all of a sudden just like merge into like one new industry?
Ooh.
Because it's important.
so.
Sorry, I'll tell you why I'm asking the question, because like you and I think have probably got like slightly different views in terms of like Europe's role in the future. Yeah. But if this is something whereby you see this like repackaging of the professional services industries, then actually there's just this incredible opportunity for them all.
Yeah. I don't think that we're gonna see a dramatic shift on that side, at least anytime soon. And the reason why is because with the commoditization of AI, what that really means for each company, especially these large consultancy groups, is it allows for them to iterate faster, and it allows for them to get more value faster, right? So like, when you hear all these people saying, oh, AI is going to take our jobs, all this stuff, well, no, not really, because you still need someone who knows that jobs well enough to be able to explain to an LLM what they want and then get back a response and validate that the answer they got was exactly what they needed, right? So if anything, what's going to happen is you're going to have workers at jobs that are more efficient. So as a result of that new efficiency that gets added, companies are going to have greater margins. Having greater margins means that now companies can invest more back into the company to hire more people and grow faster. So we're going to see a period of growth amongst companies, which, when coupled with the internet, the internet really allowed for companies to come out overnight almost and turn into insanely valuable brands and enterprises. Now, when you couple that with AI, the effect of that is going to be even more acceleration. So I think that consultancies are kind of in trouble because they also have to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit.
Sure.
Right? And they have to figure out ways that their customers need to use these new technologies and tools, and they need to figure out how to innovate rather than just repackaging what everybody else repackages.
Sure. I think the law firms are going to print money. I think the actual law firms who take a global stance are using these AI agents, focus on like just building relationships. I think they're going to smash it out of the park. They already work off of like huge margins for the most part, It's crazy they're billing for their hours. Imagine just having all your lawyers out rather than sitting at a desk, right, doing the actual work. You've got all these AI agents doing it for you. You're signing off on it, and you're just out there like schmoozing and negotiating and like doing deals for your clients. They're going to print money.
Yeah, for sure.
It's crazy. Listen, I'm going to change direction slightly. I've got to ask you like about you, right? Okay, Are you a reader?
Yeah, just when I get a chance.
Okay, if you're if you've got free time and you're going to read a book, like what sort of thing would you go for?
Actually, this was one of my favorite books right here.
Which one? Hold it up.
0 to 1.
0 to 1. Yeah,
that was one of my favorite books.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah, that book really influenced me quite a bit a couple years ago before I decided to build my company. Today, it was one of the things I was thinking about is, not going in a direction where there's competition and suffering a little bit more.
I wish I interrupted you because I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
It's the most important lesson.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that. What did you see then? So like you read the book, right? You're already like deep into the AI world.
Yeah.
If anything, that's probably giving you like more confidence. You're doing the right thing.
Well, this was before I got into really like building in AI. Okay. So I was in the software development space, and I was really looking at like what do I do to create the next thing.
So this is before Drainpipe?
Yeah, it's before Drainpipe. So this is probably 2018, 2019. I read that book, and I've read it now twice.
Yeah.
But the first time I read it, I was really just thinking about, all right, well, what's the next big thing, and what's the framework to actually build that, right? And then when I got into building Drainpipe, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to take this shortcut of trying to get to market really fast so that I can make revenue. The better bet here is to make the long-term investment that others won't make so that I can scale, so that I can service companies that others can't service. I mean, all of the investment I made the last couple of years where I went with little to no revenue, obviously I'm not in that position anymore, but, in the years where there wasn't as much, that was an investment period of me building out the moat that allows for me to operate in markets that other people can't operate in, and allows for us to be able to scale in ways that other companies can't right now.
Market defensible strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's do you know what? Europeans don't get that as well as Americans. Like when you talk about like years without like revenue, and investors in Europe be like, what the hell are you talking about? Years without revenue.
Yeah.
That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas Americans get it.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think all investors have a problem with that because they're just like, well, why would you do that, right? But like at the same time, I'm looking at it like there's a period of R&D here. We're breaking ground. This is something revolutionary.
Well, sorry, I've got to jump in. Tell us more. Like explain about like the revolutionary aspects of like what you're doing. Because like when I first saw some of your ideas, I was just like wow.
Yeah. So
they're mental. In a good way.
Yeah, so let's talk about. I'm going to explain that. But what I also want to explain is that when you're building a deep tech, in particular, when you're getting into like really, really revolutionary tech that nobody even knows how to articulate, there's a different kind of business model. It's not like the same as like opening up a nail salon and having a retail, right? Um, the business model is you start off in the revolutionary stage, right? And that's where you're in the mix of building something revolutionary. But then when you bring it to market, your customers don't know how to use that revolutionary technology. And you don't even know how to explain it to the customer, right? So you can't just sit there and go on a business model canvas and write out like this is what my customer is going to think of this revolutionary technology. You have to transition into a phase called the evolutionary phase, right? So you start off in the revolutionary phase where you're creating something revolutionary, but then you transition to the evolutionary phase, which is where your product evolves to meet the demand that exists for it, right? And so when I started Drainpipe, I had a simple problem. The simple problem was we needed to be able to take different kinds of data and store it in a uniform length, right? So it would be no different than having a book where a few of your pages are longer than others. It would just seem like a mess, right? Because the pages aren't uniform. But in AI, when you have a paragraph or you have a sentence or you have one image and or you have a video or you have audio, all of these things have different lengths of data contained in it. So we needed a way to be able to take that data and put it into a uniform page, right?
Sure.
And so I had to dig deep into the mathematics behind that. And then once I kind of worked through that, I needed to verify it, which is why I joined the United Nations AI for Health focus group back then, because I wanted to make sure that the math that I was doing was of medical grade accuracy, right? And then after that, now I'm in product building mode. So now we're building a product around this innovation, and now we're deep in the evolutionary phase. So that's where you start getting into building these crazy demos and showing people what's possible. You know, 2023, we did a demo of using synthetic environments to train drones how to find humans buried under rubble, and we were one of the first people to ever debut that in Cannes. And that was only
And that
2
was
days after the earthquake.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So go on. So which was it? The earthquake in Turkey?
Yes, it was.
And it was also. Do you remember the building collapsed? Sadly, collapsed in Florida.
Yeah. So that was the same year.
That was when you first showed me. It,
Yeah.
Like you showed me how the technology would work.
Yeah.
And it was literally drones flying over what looked like a disaster area, and they were able to detect humans where they were trapped under the rubble.
Yeah, with like
Insane.
limbs hanging out.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Insane.
So, yeah.
Can I jump into one thing with this which you showed me? Sure. And if I'm not allowed to mention it, then we'll edit it out afterwards.
That's fine.
Stopping mass school shootings without impacting the Second Amendment. Right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? What you showed me?
Yeah.
See, I know because you work on so many things. I imagine that it was you can have your guns, do what you want, but actually within every gun, if it goes within a certain distance to a school, it automatically it was almost like a green gas or something like an image on a screen that you showed me.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah. So the way that you have to look at security is not just through. It's not a one or the other kind of thing, right? It's not just looking at cameras and ignoring everything else. And it's also not just looking at social media and looking for people threatening your facility, right? So you have to actually combine the two. And then, when you look at social media, you can get an understanding of your threat profile based on what's being posted about your facility. And then you have to have analysis of who's coming into the facility, right? So if you have cameras on the outside of a school looking outward and you see somebody walking up to your school with a gun, well, that's a great time to lock the doors, right? And to prevent the things that happen in America, because it happens too much. And, obviously we don't want to restrict the natural born right of an American to own a firearm, but at the same time, you have this problem where we need to better protect our public schools and educational facilities so that this doesn't continue to be a thing, because no one on this planet should fear that their kids are going to die in a classroom when they're just going there to become educated adults, right? And the fact that that even exists is disgusting. It really, it breaks my heart every time I see that. We just had one maybe 3 weeks ago in America, something like that. And every time I see it, I get so frustrated because this problem can be solved
Sure.
with the right combination of technology and the right oversight of that technology. It's totally doable.
Sure.
So
I mean, I think in Europe, and I've got to be careful where I tread with this, but you know what? I wish we had the Second Amendment here. You know, I really, I know it's hard, and you go, well, actually, if a country isn't used to it, should they ever
Yeah.
have it? But I think seeing like again, like the sort of technologies that like companies like Drainpipe are, in fact, no, not companies like Drainpipe. Drainpipe is the only company I've ever come across that is coming up with the ideas that you're coming up with and implementing them. And if there are others out there, apologies,
yeah.
never seen it.
Well, I've worked really hard at laying demos down and showing people what's possible, right? Because as a visionary of an organization and in tech and in a very science heavy market, or I would say in a very science heavy sector, um, I have to showcase what technology is possible of, right? And then this brings about that responsibility that I have when talking to governments or militaries or, the UN or whoever, when talking to policymakers at ETH Zurich, um, it brings about this responsibility to connect deep tech with democracy, right? Because you have democracy over here that has to evolve and has to make decisions on these technologies and on how the people want to interact with these technologies. But at the same time, there's not a deep enough understanding of this technology to begin with. So there has to be people who are willing to meet them halfway and bridge that gap. And I've found myself kind of needing to play that role without wanting to all the time, but it's just been something that I've been forced into because now I'm pushing the bar so far that I need to make people aware of what's going on when it comes to drones, when it comes to, the proliferation of small language models, when it comes to, how we use AI in healthcare. Because otherwise, you're going to have these people who go out in the world and they're like, "Oh, just dump your MRI data into our model," and it doesn't work that way. There's no convention of science that shows that you can just take any kind of model, train it on whatever, and then dump MRI data in there, and you're going to get an actual safe response. So, there has to be this voice of reason that might not be liked all the time,
Sure.
but it has to be there to keep this conversation honest.
And that's where you see your role in it.
Big time.
So okay, so like, okay, what organizations are you're linked with? The United Nations.
Yeah, so I'm the only U.S. contributor of AI for radiology at the UN. I'm the chair of the AI steering committee at the U.S. National Drone Association. I'm also I'm on the I'm on the advisory board at the Center for American Studies at Christopher Newport University in Newport News, which is where America builds all her aircraft carriers. I'm also recently on the advisory board of CPHI Americas, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing events in the world. And I don't think I left anything out.
Any space agencies we're allowed to mention, or?
Well, it's interesting because through the work that I do in Virginia at Christopher Newport University, particularly the Center for American Studies, it's brought about. It's reconnected me with old friends.
Sure.
And so that's been an interesting thing where, now I'm kind of in this mix of different agencies that are quite interesting, and
very interesting.
yeah,
Like,
it's
like you're sitting at the center of it. I've got to ask you, look, going back a few years, like when I told you what we were building, I can't even remember. I'm going to be honest, I can't remember the first conversation we had I remember saying to Emma afterwards, okay, like this guy's serious. He's on something big here. But we've got on the phone to you and we've said to you, listen, we're building the world's smartest community. We're building an AI community. You may recall went through our business model with us. You're like, where's your hero product? And I was like, what do you mean? You're like, you got to have a hero product, right? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course.
And I've got to say, it probably actually saved the company.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was so impressed pulling up here today, right? Like I just came off the plane, like literally just came off the plane and changed in the bathroom just to, get this thing, get
Could
set
have got
up.
in one of the board. There's like
I
20
could have.
boardrooms
I could have.
there.
I was like, no, I don't want to bother.
Yeah.
I don't want to bother him. But to roll up here and see what you've accomplished in that time period, I'm super proud of you, man.
Thank you. I could say the same about you. It's
you took the feedback, and I actually distinctly remember that conversation, and you took it and then you ran with it, right? And you didn't stop, and you iterated on it. You made it even better. And
we made thousands within like many, many, many thousands. You should have negotiated a commission. We did pretty well off of that, I think after the conversation I had with you, and you're like, look, this is what you need to do. I think we did more sales in 2 weeks than what we'd done in the whole year up until that point. So it was fine. Actually, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So,
but I see my role in the industry, also not being just a CEO, right? Because what I find it really tacky when CEOs come out and they're just constantly pushing their product and themselves, and it's just a constant sales pitch, and it's like, especially in Europe, people, the minute you start doing that, that's when they just blank out, and they don't want that.
And they've got no shame about doing it.
No.
They'll just go in like completely transactional. Yeah. Here's what we can do. Like, we buy our product.
And I don't want to be that way. And really, what I'm trying to do is I'm actually trying to foster a community of people, right? So, it's not a network, because a network is very transactional. But when you're community driven, now you're thinking about, well, what can I do for others where I'm not expecting anything back because it's the right thing to do. And you have this, especially in my case, just from my journey alone, I've developed this faith, not only in myself, but in my decision making, that I can live with, because I have faith that when I'm making a decision, there's a purpose behind it. Whether or not I understand it, that's questionable, right? But there's a purpose behind why I feel strongly about doing something. And so it's not about what I get back in return right away. It's about a higher calling, right? I'm on this path of ascension now, that is far greater than myself. Sure. And so if I could do more to help other people to also, start that journey of ascension, it's all for the better.
Yeah. I think there was actually, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. I never really wanted to build a company. Initially, I would have happily have just been like a number two in the background, helping someone else build their company. But I think there was an element, or probably a slightly immature element of me, where it was like, I wanted to prove it, to myself, others, stick my finger up at them in some way. But I think that there was also a frustration with where the world was going, and it's I think it just became abundantly clear fairly early on that it was probably around the 2008 financial crisis, right? So you were probably about 17 at the time, and I was just like, this doesn't seem right, Yeah. And it felt like and I'm not blaming the governments, because what do you do in that situation? You should have planned better, I guess, after 9/11. But it felt like they were just kicking the can down the road. And I think now we're feeling that. And I think that actually, when I realized how advanced the technology was going to get, I was like, oh, shit, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting, you also had a vision too, right? And what's really beautiful about what you guys do at Raion is, I've been to incubators and I've been to accelerators where you got to be there in person, you have to have an office, and then they interfere in your business. They they
Try and take shares.
yeah they try to like
Do you not think that was stupid of us though?
make themselves bigger, better, right? But
Yeah.
like what I think you've done that is far different than what I've seen anyone else do on the planet has been you've digitized that so that it doesn't matter where you are. You could be a kid in the slums in you know South Chicago. You could be a kid in Africa. You could be a kid in the outskirts of Paris. You could be a kid, anywhere in the world, and you can access this tremendous resource of not only information, not only discounts for your business, so that you can get situated and get on your feet and not have to worry about starving to pay for servers, but also the network that's really important to help you do that.
Yeah. Look, our value proposition is insane, but it came, as you know, it came at a cost to us, right? Like we went through hell, like doing it. We was just like, I said to the team, guys, just create value, create value, create value, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that like when I first met Jan, like the first meeting we ever had, I was just like, look, everyone's going to chase this elusive like AI, and there's a reality to it. Very few are going to actually be able to build it. And what everyone's going to do is neglect the human element. What we're going to do, we're going to focus on the human element. And then I think what happened was that we went after the founders. We're like, look, who are the people that are seriously going to build businesses? Are they going to scale them to 100 million annually in revenue, for which there's not that many, by the way, right? And then I think that we just got the attention of the big companies. And then they were just like, okay, how are you getting all these people? And I was like, don't know. We just literally, well, I did know, but I wasn't going to tell them. But I was just like, look, it inevitably comes down to hard work. And then we got to a point where all of a sudden I was like, let's just go to like all the Mag 7 companies. Let's go to like the FANG companies, right? And let's just be realistic about it. At some point, a lot of these guys, they're either going to be made redundant, but they're not going to go. They're going to go and build their own AI companies, or alternatively, they're just going to leave and be like, why am I earning $900,000 a year when I can go and like make billions of dollars? And what we did very well, very early on was, and we got this right, we went to like companies like NVIDIA, went to companies like Palantir, and we just made friends. We just made friends. We didn't ask them for anything. We didn't pitch them anything.
That's very European of you, sir.
What is? Go on.
Yeah, just going and making friends, because that's how you build
Right.
a network.
So, which is interesting because, like with Palantir, I always think like Palantir. I heard Carp talk about, their sales in Europe are they suck, right? And he's very honest about it. But have you met with Palantir's sales team ever? No. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say this, but again, it's they know they've got some insane product, right? Or okay, that's we can dive into that. They know they've got some insane product, and they go onto the call with that knowledge, right? Whereas when you're doing business in Europe, you got to go and have a chat with them. You got to get to know people. And again, I think when you've got that product to that point, you're like, no, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
So
I think American companies tend to be that way more, of the take it or leave it.
But is it transactional then? Is that kind of what I was criticizing Europeans for? Are some of the American companies the same?
Oh, American companies are way more transactional than European companies are. Yeah, big time. Because in Europe, in order to actually get a deal done, you have to have a relationship with the person that you're doing the deal with, right? And so for me, my traditional sales cycle can sometimes extend to 18 months after an initial point of contact with a potential customer, because I'm not rushing them into quote unquote having sex on the first date, right? I'm kind of taking my time and getting to understand, who they are, what their problems are, and giving them the time to come to me and say, we need to solve this problem. Because if they're not ready to do it and they don't want to take the initiative to solve a problem, I can't fix that, right? So anything I do to sell somebody on something that they don't want anyway, they're not going to want it. And if they want it from somebody else other than me, then they have, go ahead and do that. But I take the approach of being there as not only a confidant to the person who I'm working with, the point of contact I'm working with, but also a friend and someone who is, shepherding a team that essentially ran America's computing infrastructure for the last 40 years into, battle for that company, right? So, the company can rest at night knowing that somebody like me is literally up all hours of the day and night working with a crazy team to get things done for them. And that's the approach I've taken. And I've noticed that in Europe it has been a lot more appreciated, and the reception has been just a lot stronger than in America.
I just can't wait till Europe gets their head around Palantir. I think it's going to be the best thing that's ever happened to them, honestly.
Yeah, we'll see.
Hey, look, I want to ask you, like, in terms of, like, you obviously go across like multiple sectors. Is there one sector that you love more than others? Is there, if you could only solve one problem, like, is there one that you would focus on?
There is drones. The problem with drones is right now it's easily my favorite. It's easily my favorite problem to really address. And the reason being is that we need it. It's not a. This is something that's an emerging threat. It's happening now.
Sure.
And too many countries are too far behind right now.
What does that mean? They're too far behind.
We have countries like Russia that are putting 200,000 men behind screens to be drone pilots, and then you have other countries which think that they're still going to be, storming beaches like Normandy with bayonets.
Yeah.
And we're totally not in that world anymore. The world has evolved. And so the way that we think about warfighting has to change, unfortunately. And, when people look at what's going on in Ukraine and in Russia, and they reflect and they say, oh, wow, that looks really bad. But the truth is that doesn't just look bad. It's coming to you. It's coming to your country. It's coming to the world. This is not just something where you're watching from afar and saying, oh, boy, thank God it's happening over there. It's happening everywhere. This is a proliferation event.
Why are European leaders not realizing that?
Why? That's a really good question. I think that there's a resistance to jump in on this because countries want to leave their options open, right? So when you have countries that are kind of unsure of how they're going to need to defend themselves, they don't want to bring this conversation up to the table because they need options, right? And so they need options to defend themselves, and they don't want to just say, well, let's convene like a new Geneva style convention on drones and decide whether or not we want drones even being used in warfare or whether or not people deserve that, right? Because we're in a different world now from 20 years ago where, the big persistent threat was you get into a vehicle, the chance of you getting into a car accident when you get into that vehicle is not zero, right? It's a non-zero. There's always a chance you're going to get into a car accident anytime you're in a vehicle. It could just be really low, really high, but there's always a chance. Today, just by breathing on this planet, there's a chance you're going to die from a drone. Just by breathing. And we've never seen that before. And that's problematic. And humans, the people who actually inhabit this world, have not really had much of a vote other than a very select few who have exacerbated this problem. And so we do need to have a conversation internationally, both on AI and on this subject, on whether or not this is the direction that we want to run down. Because we're running down that direction fast, and it's scary, 100%. And, this is part of why I'm a part of the U.S. National Drone Association as the chair of the AI Steering Committee, because particularly in America, they're disadvantaged.
America's disadvantaged.
When
Why?
it comes to drones, we are disadvantaged.
Really?
Because there is a common cultural thing there of arrogance, ignorance, and incompetence that has completely blinded them to the need to take this serious as a proliferation.
Do you not think Trump is now?
Well, this is kind of separate from the administration. This kind of boils down to actual leadership in each individual, armed forces group, right? So like whether or not it's the Marines, whether or not it's the Navy or the Army or whoever, like the leadership in these, in the different armed forces, there's been this like blinding where it's like, oh well, if we just cover our eyes, it doesn't exist, right? And it's really dangerous. And now we're starting to kind of have some changes culturally that are starting to trickle down from the top, which uh, there's a catch-22 to that too, right? There's always some good and some bad with that, but at the same time, we need to, like, America needs to kind of accelerate their output of drones, the types of drones they work with, because there's so many problems with this. You look in Ukraine, they're using fiber optic wire to even pilot the drone, and so now you don't even have signals. So now this isn't a signal issue anymore, right?
You
Then
familiar with Red Cat?
yeah, yep,
So I think they're doing something similar. No, I think they're developing something similar.
yeah. I work very closely with Ukraine on some of these things, like with the group that actually developed the first fiber optic drones for Ukraine. Um, and there's so many emerging threats going on right now. And the thing is they're iterating so fast because this isn't a matter of like war by convenience. This is a matter of survival for them. So the pace at which they're iterating and innovating and literally in the theater of war is unlike anything that we've ever seen. And so they're 3D printing out there. They're literally
In Ukraine,
on the front line. Yeah, on the front
right?
line. They're 3D printing. They're
But
building
when you tell
components.
me this, I kind of, well, no, not I kind of, I feel it before anyway. I get why Trump is desperate just to like de-escalate, right? Like when you look at GDP spending on like defense for like Russia and like Nazi Germany between like 1929 from the Great Depression, right, all the way up to like 1939. In fact, I'm not going to quote the numbers because I can't remember exactly what they are, but like they're insanely high. And as we know, like whichever country can produce fastest is the country that wins any war. But of course, like after Pearl Harbor, America just like click their fingers and they could just ramp up very, very fast. Whereas, let's be honest, if it wasn't for you guys doing that, Europe would have just fallen completely. And I do think that Europe is being very naive. And when you see like governments talk about increasing GDP investment up to 2.5%, it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I don't understand what we're seeing. People like yourself who are actually involved in it, right? And you obviously speak to these people, right? So what's their reaction when you're like, guys, you need to take this seriously?
It's like a coin toss. Some of them are receptive to it. Others are resistant to it, right? And I think you're always going to have this faction in different militaries where they're reluctant to change because they know what has worked traditionally, right? But the problem is that change is happening so fast in the theater of war today that you can't rely on that anymore, right? And then now the lethality that we're talking about with something like drones is that of nuclear. It's and the proliferation of it is that of nuclear. I mean, China has a fleet of over 1 million kamikaze drones. What that looks like when that hits the shore, nobody wants to understand. Nobody wants to see that.
Sure.
That is unlike that. That is hell raining down. So there is a component of
Sorry, just
education.
explain for people watching, like a kamikaze drone. I'm fairly self-explanatory,
Yeah.
but I want to just make sure I'm being
So it's
clear.
a drone that flies one direction, and the intent of that drone is to drop a munition um, when it crashes on something. So it is going to fly in one direction, and it's going to crash into something, and it has a munition on it that is going to go boom and create a lot of damage and death.
and without causing too much fear, like there's also, I mean, it's a very real possibility. We're going to start seeing people just program drones to go and assassinate like individuals.
Yeah, I mean, if a 15-year-old right now can go build a drone and control it and put it in the air. So if a 15-year-old could do that, like the threat from drones, the actual terror threat and risk from drones right now is the highest it could possibly be. Now, the only thing that's kind of the saving grace is when you get into the electrical signals and when you get into how these drones communicate with the controller. But when you factor in that you can now control a drone with a fiber optic wire, that is a problem. And then also, too, what does that mean for the next stage, right? So if now we're just putting a little fishing wire connected to a drone to actually control it, well, what happens when we cut that wire, right? Well, when we finally get around to cutting that wire, which is imminent at this point, now you have full autonomy. And that's imminent, especially as we start seeing more and more of these multimodal models like Gemma 3 and DeepSeek, which are, DeepSeek like 1.5B and stuff like that, where you're able to take a small model that has multimodal capabilities. You're able to put it on a device that can sit on a drone, and now it can get feedback from the different sensors on that drone and steer the drone in the maneuvers it needs to make. And that is when we're going to have full autonomy. And that's one of the most dangerous scenarios we could possibly have. But it's coming. This is not futuristic sci-fi stuff. No. This is coming in only a matter of months.
And only a matter of months?
Yeah.
Right.
We're not talking years away.
No, I know. I speak to a lot of the drone companies. And I didn't know it was months, to be honest. But
yeah, we're not. This is not years away.
I thought it was a year or two.
No.
Okay. Let me ask you, like you mentioned about like aircraft carriers. I'm not sure how much you know about them, or like how important are they? Like if all of a sudden we no longer have like fighter jets, we just essentially have like no fighter pilots.
Well, you need the next iteration of that, right? Which Iran beat America to having the first drone carrier, right? And it's like, well, this is another thing where we're falling behind.
But what's the difference between a drone carrier and?
So it's literally a carrier that just carries drones.
No, sure, but I imagine it's just like it's very similar to an aircraft carrier.
Yeah,
no?
it's very big.
Right.
But it's designed purposely for deploying drones, and usually large. So those are like your bigger drones that are doing like ISR. And stuff like that, or you might have mothership drones where you have smaller drones in the belly of it, and then they're flying off these aircraft carriers to go do a mission. And then when they get close enough to like a point where they have to, perform some operation, the belly opens up and the little drones fly out so that they can do their thing,
sure.
right?
Yeah. Star Wars.
Yeah, it's getting there. But
yeah.
we need to, navies are going to need this, right? Iran's already started doing that. They're also converting cargo containers. There's so many different things that they're using now to actually just put drones in the air from sea. And this is, imagine when you have all these boats right off the coast of a country, or right off the coast of the Mediterranean, right here.
You got the Strait of Gibraltar.
Yeah,
like 50 feet away.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
And you can fly a drone across the Strait of Gibraltar with no problem at all.
Sure.
And it could be a small one.
Yeah.
And now, so if you have a cargo ship that all of a sudden the containers just pop open and you got all these birds flying out, they're everywhere. And they can hit both sides of the Strait of Gibraltar without problem at all.
Yeah.
That's ease.
That's why I've been talking, actually I won't say which company, but I've been talking with one drone company specifically about, what the Strait needs to really do. I'm just interested because you've got these shipping companies here. They're literally moving 1,000 times a day, skyscrapers on the water, And I just think at some point, I mean, you're going to have drones this big, and they're going to be able to just go,
Yeah.
They're going to drop something, or they're going to have something, and they're going to just blow. You'll be able to blow the whole ship up. Well, sorry, actually, is that an exaggeration?
Maybe not. I mean, especially when you start thinking about how these things work in sequence,
Sure.
right? So now when you have a swarm, now we're talking something that's potentially really serious. One or two, you're gonna get a little boom here, boom
Sure.
there. But when you have a swarm of thousands of them,
Sure, you could sink.
yeah,
You could
you
sink
can
them.
sink. Yeah, I mean, look at what's going on right now in the Red Sea, where Yemen is and the Houthis have been going after ships, right? And they're using. I don't know if you've seen the maritime surface vehicle announcements that they do whenever they come up with a new one, but it's like Apple quality production for a new surface vehicle that's a drone that's literally designed to just shoot to aim at a boat and to bring the boat down. So it's like that's and this is the direction we're going, where you're getting now groups that traditionally didn't even have the funding to be able to be this lethal. They're able to be this lethal because the cost of lethality is dropping so fast, because you can go buy a $200 DJI and strap a grenade to it, and now you have a bomb.
Sure. Yeah.
So
So that's one thing I used to talk to like the British like politicians about. Right, they didn't get it. I was like, everyone's going to have phenomenal technology, even your enemies.
yeah,
And when I used to say that to the like to certain MPs, they were just like, "What are you talking about?" And unfortunately, we're now at a point, like you were saying, doesn't matter how powerful your army is, you know, everyone's going to have powerful technology that can do serious damage.
yeah,
So, what do we do? Like, is there a solution?
yeah. I mean, raising awareness is number one. Building toward it. I mean, countries have to build toward it. I think a year or two ago, the in America, the Biden administration had put in an executive order that outlawed autonomous decision making, and unfortunately, we need to build toward that, because if any adversary of any country hits you with an autonomous, if they have autonomous decision making in the battlefield, what do you do? Because now you're going to be outmaneuvered and outthought by machines. And although there's a serious ethical problem there, we need to have that debate as human beings on this planet, whether or not we want machines being used against us in such a manner. And we haven't even had a chance to do that yet. So that needs to probably happen, but it also needs to happen with awareness being raised.
Have you read the Technological Republic yet, Dr.
I have
Karp?
not. I have not had a chance to do
You've
that.
got to, honestly, like
Yeah.
again, like Alex Karp talks about this, and it's fascinating because I think the one point that he made, was it in the book? Yeah, he talks about how every country fights differently and has to defend themselves differently.
Yeah, they have different doctrine. There's different. Every country has different war doctrine, which is like their entire philosophy of war is different from one country to another. And it's insane how in depth that gets, right? So like when you study how, war doctrine in ancient China evolved throughout the years versus how war doctrine amongst the Moors in northern Africa evolved throughout the years, and then how war doctrine that came out of Constantinople evolved throughout the years in Rome, right? Every culture has a different kind of war doctrine that has evolved from, you know, thousands of years.
And you mentioned Northern Africa there. Are we allowed to talk about what you're doing?
Well, I'm
literally
going
8 miles away.
Yeah, so I'm going to Morocco to help the Moroccan Film Institute. So they have the National Film Institute in Rabat, and it's really interesting what's gone on in Morocco, because Cannes is like this cultural creative capital. It's this like creative capital of it's really the capital of creatives, right? So creatives go to Cannes to celebrate creation.
That's right. And when you're talking about creative, you're talking about like the film. Because
Well,
historically, like Cannes is like the film festival.
Well, yeah, but like
Sure.
that, and just various entertainment, what have you, and it's kind of evolved now to also include AI, and there's several big tech events that go on there throughout the year. So it's kind of like this very important place for culture and creation, right? And not that far away in Northern Africa, you also have like Marrakesh, you have Rabat, you have Casablanca, and these cities in Morocco where there is a tremendous growth of creativity and filmmaking and just a different kind of like cultural evolution that's taking place there. Kind of like you're seeing in like Saudi Arabia in a sense, right?
Saudi
Where
Arabia is crazy.
where they've had this huge cultural shift that opened their arms, and as a result of that, and not being so closed off like they were 25 years ago, they're seeing growth that is insane because they're bringing in external investment, and now hosting boxing matches and all these different things just by them being open to other cultures experiencing their culture.
Ronaldo's playing there, right?
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And like I think Morocco is an interesting one. Someone was telling me recently that like they've smashed it in terms of like car manufacturing.
Yep.
I was like, how the hell has Morocco captured that? And again, you have the right people in charge, you have the right focus. The opportunity is actually there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And also too, like, look, them winning the World Cup in 2030, right? So they're going to be hosting the World Cup in
Morocco
2030.
is?
Yeah.
didn't know that.
So
Wow, okay.
them hosting the World Cup is just another sign that they have really upped the game.
I was talking with your FIFA World Cup team yesterday.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
You're always talking to crazy people.
Always, yeah. I love that. Do you know what it is? It's Emma. Like, so we were calculating. Okay, Emma's worked with me now for like 18 years.
Yeah.
But with Raion, so like let's say last 8 years, I've met with, I think it's a bit more, but I don't know the exact number. But it's over 18,000 people.
Wow.
Every single one of them has come through Emma. Like whether it's the Vatican, whether it's FIFA, whether it's like Nvidia or Palantir, all just through her. She's just an absolute machine.
Wow.
So yeah, but that's why. But that's interesting. Like Morocco's. Have you been to Morocco?
No, it's gonna be my first.
It's your first time. When are you going?
I'm going Friday.
Yeah. Okay. Well, where are you flying to?
I don't know yet. Like it's gonna be set, and you know how I live.
Yeah, I know.
Like, it's just I'll find out.
Actually, can we talk about how you roll? Like you've just let's be honest. As founders go, you're up there with one of the biggest risk takers I know.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
You're fairly crazy as well.
I'm there. Yeah. I'm at that. I'm probably at the maximum that you can get.
What is the biggest risk you've taken? Like when you're like, fuck, this is just what the hell am I doing with this?
Well, if not spending several years of your life earning money is one of them, then
no, but hold up, like every like, a lot of founders,
but,
you've done some crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've taken one-way trips to other countries without having enough money for return flights and things like that, and then just having the internal faith and understanding of where I'm at with something to know that I'll be able to get through it. So
where's that faith come from?
I think that some of it actually comes from I have a different kind of depth capacity for suffering that is not common, right? So after losing my angel investor in the manner that he passed away, my capacity for pain really changed, and it altered me in ways that I can't really fully explain. But I know that when things seem impossible to others, for me, it doesn't really, I shake it off, right? So when things seem like they're really bad for others, I'm usually smiling, because compared to the trauma of losing somebody that I loved in such a manner, it doesn't feel like much. It actually, it's manageable. Even going up on big stages and speaking in front of 60,000 people or whatever, those moments, I don't even get phased anymore, because compared to that moment of losing somebody who I cared about that deeply, it just, there's no
Changes it.
comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And so now I'm a lot more willing to go out and go on a limb to protect this thing that we created together. And there's no extent that I'll spare to keep this thing alive and keep going. And obviously, it's paid dividends, right? I mean,
Sure.
now I'm quite close to representing 5% of the European GDP in AI right now. We work with some of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the planet. And really what we're doing is we're helping customers be able to search documents and utilize a trustworthy AI framework that I invented for a pharmaceutical company. So they're utilizing a framework for trustworthy AI to ensure that the results that they're getting back from AI are not utterly hallucinated and are also compliant with European law, especially in regulated markets, because you can't have just answers coming back to you that you can't attribute to a certain source. You have to have all of these components in place to properly account for where you're getting data from and how that data is being used, especially when the European regulators come knocking.
Can I go back to what you were saying before? Because because I think there's something like very interesting. I think you and I probably, well, I can't speak for yourself, but I've definitely been at war with God, right? Like in terms of like, and I definitely think it changes your like capacity for pain, right?
Yeah.
And I think you hear other like very successful like founders talk about this. Is it possible to be successful? Do you think it's possible for you to have been successful without having to like test your resilience? Because I've got to be honest, like nothing like really phases. I'll tell you one thing actually that phases me. My relationships with like people that I care about, if they're not going well, that stresses me out. But otherwise, like everything, and listen, I can be an arsehole. I can scream, I can shout, but like, nothing with work really phases me. And I think like when you've had something just like the world just kick you like as hard as it can, it definitely changes you forever. Do you have to have that? Do you have to have that? Does everyone have to have that kick in order to actually?
I think it's a rite of passage. I think that as you know, like when you're in the ocean, right? The deeper that the seas are, the higher the waves, right? So the deeper you go, the deeper that the water is, you can have swells of over 100 feet if you're in 1,000-foot waters, right? So in order to actually progress in order to follow the righteous path of ascension, you have to break barriers on the way up, right? And I think everyone has to kind of go through that pain and suffering on that path to ascension, because it's what the universe puts in front of us to test our resolve of how badly we want it, right? And I know for me at least, I've had to face numerous of these tests, and I get tested all the time in every little way possible. And first you start off by trying to bend the reality to even be able to show other people that this is happening. And then once that happens, then you have to deal with the next issues. And there's always something that the universe is going to put in your way to try to, convince you to give up. And that's just the natural law of positives and negatives that you have to deal with. So I think that it's really important that people suffer along their journey, and they do it in a way where they grow from it, and they don't let it consume them, right? Because failure is not failure if you're just iterating, right? So you only fail when you quit. If you're iterating,
Sure.
you're adapting and you're evolving. If you
You're
quit,
making life happen.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to make life happen.
Yeah, and I've also found too that when you accelerate chaos, change happens a whole lot faster.
Yeah.
So if you just embrace chaos, and it just embrace that sometimes the chaos is going to burn, and it's going to feel like you're sticking your hand on a hot stove.
Sure.
Just embrace it, and
Joe,
it's
sorry, I just remembered like there was one time like it was probably about the fourth time like we went broke. It was probably about like 6 years, 5 years ago, and I just remember phoning up Jan. I was like, Jan, we're broke. He was like, you know, and I was like, no, I was like, seriously, like, we're not going to be able to pay our bills. He was like, I mean, we'll work it out. And like there was no emotion in it. There was no like panic. It was just like it's just another problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You need that. But it's been a lot easier in some ways for me because like I've got a co-founder. Like why have you not gone down that route? Why have you thought, right, I'm gonna be a solo founder, I'm gonna do this on my own?
because I didn't really have another option. I didn't want particularly in technology, like when you're doing tech innovation, it gets really hairy when you have two different personalities because now you're spending some of that time that you could be spending being productive, you're spending negotiating with somebody about some sort of design that, 5 months from now is going to be, not even really important. And it turns into this management game of egos and personalities and, these different things. And early on in an org, like I really wanted to deeply entrench myself and build a company from the ground up the right way, which is that I'll roll through the trenches myself first. Then I'll be able to package up what I do and give it to somebody else as far as engineering. Then I'll roll into the trenches in sales, and I'll be able to package that up, give it to somebody in sales. Then I'll be able to, roll in the trenches of, here and package it up, give it to somebody. Being a leader is not just talking about quotes from a book. It's actually being the person who runs in the door first when the bullets start flying and when the blame starts getting, besmudged around. So I think that by doing that has put me in a far better position now because I've seen executives that I used to work for that would think, oh, well, we're gonna scale this startup up and we're gonna hire C-level brass first. It's like, no, that's actually not how you scale a business. You scale a business from the trenches because it's the action in the trenches that keep that business afloat. If you don't have action in the trenches, you're not going to be hunting anything to kill for your team to eat, right? And you have to always be hunting for a meal when you're early on. And so if you hire only people up at the 30,000 foot view, well, they're not going to know what the culture is on the ground, and they're not going to know how to operate in the trenches because they're going to be too concerned about getting blood on their suit. And nobody has time for that in a startup. And I've seen too many startups try to hire from the top down, and these guys up here don't even know how to manage execution because it's too deep in the trenches for them.
Yeah.
And they don't know even what needs to occur for them to manage properly.
Sure.
So I wanted to take the opposite approach and start in the trenches, and then we work our way backwards. And that's what we've been doing, and it's been working out quite well.
Very well.
The only thing that's been tricky has just been, the reception of the venture capital industry has been very wishy-washy. They've been very reluctant to, engage.
It's an odd one that, it is because like I think that it's one of those things where if they don't act, they're going to zero.
Yeah.
And if they do act, they risk making a mistake. But
but their inaction is going to lead them to zero anyway. So I'm going to eat their lunch.
Sure.
Right, and I'm eating the lunch of a lot of their portfolio companies in Europe, and so they're heading to zero faster
So they're
than they
loving
even
you
know
in
it.
Europe at the moment.
People are loving. Yeah, the companies, everything are loving me.
Go on. So what, we've still got some time. Like, if you're cool, like carrying on, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, tell me about this. Like, most of the time, like you speak to Europeans, and they're just like, "Got to get to the United States. Got to get to the United States." I'm one of those people, right? got to get into the US straight away. The first thing Jan and I did, we like booked flights. We went over to the US, right? You've taken a different approach. You've just been like, got to get over to Europe.
Well, it's the same thing for Europeans, right? So, funny story. I was in San Francisco in September, and I was meeting with Tony Kim from BlackRock. Tony Kim runs the global technology portfolio at BlackRock. He's one of the most powerful technology investors in the world. And I was at lunch with him in San Francisco, and he jokingly said to me, he's like, "Kid, you'd have better chances raising money in Silicon Valley if you were Dutch, right?" And I'm like, "Hey, come on, Uncle Tony." But really, he wasn't wrong, because when you're from far away, you're valued more, right? And the same thing as an American coming to foreign lands, I'm valued more because I have a different perspective. It's a different culture, and that cultural difference is what drives attention and respect, right? And my wanting to be somewhere in another culture or what have you drives that inherent like trust, and it takes a little bit more time to actually build it on an individual basis, but it definitely opens people's eyes to start. And I don't have to deal with that. Oh, you might as well be Dutch because I'm a New Yorker in Germany, and I'm the Dutch. I might as well be.
And there's a respect
Dutch.
for Americans. That's one thing I'm not sure Americans get. Like, there's a real respect for them.
Big
right?
time.
Like especially when they come to Europe, Asia, the Middle East.
Yep.
And I think that actually Americans have got this like false idea about how they're viewed from the outside world.
Yeah.
Right. Trump's the perfect example. Right. They were like, "Oh, Trump's hated." Like, nah, no way. He's not.
Yeah.
Right. He wasn't hated in the first term. He wasn't hated after Biden came into power. He wasn't hated in fact, he was like praised in the run up to this election.
Yeah, there's people on all sides of that, and that's also another thing. It's like, I'm trying to get a business off the ground, and I'm trying to bring innovation to the world that can really help people, and that can help your everyday people even to be able to save money and just work
but Europeans are cynical though. They are. They're more
Americans
cynical than
Americans are too, just in a different kind of way, I think.
I've had Americans just be like, "Oh, this is great. We want to spot it.
Yeah.
Send your bank." Like they'll just transfer money on the call.
So that's the having sex on the first date kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Most Americans will do that, whereas Europeans require a little bit more, relationship building. Americans are less cynical. Americans are less cynical in their initial approach, right? But and they're a lot more like dream focused, and like, oh man, what's like the American dream thing. It's not dead. It's just the mechanics that made it so special aren't really there anymore, right? It's evolved into something different. And so, like, the issue that we see where that kind of diverges from Europe is that Europe has to kind of be cynical in a sense, because when problems start here on these lands, as they have historically, it gets ugly, right? So when war or chaos starts to proliferate on the lands that make up Europe, it gets ugly. And Americans have never actually experienced that kind of proliferation of war before.
Well, not in
Nothing to the level though, even of what Europe has seen historically for thousands of years, not just in the last 500. We're talking thousands of years of brutal wars and bloody wars here on these lands, which culturally, what that does is it forces the people to look ahead a whole lot more with cynicism, to say, well, we have to be careful here, and we can't just jump into this. We need to make sure, right? And that's where, like, when Americans kind of nitpick at how Europe is like so, quick to legislate and stuff like that, they're ignoring that simple fact that the legislation happens here faster because it has to happen. If it doesn't happen and something proliferates, it is a problem, and it could be lights out again. for another world war, and we don't want that.
You know, you don't have a strong Europe without a strong America, and you don't have a strong America without a strong Europe.
100%. And also too, you don't have strong global security without the globe, right? So without everyone in it contributing somehow, and you know, and this is something that's honestly, as an American, has been really heartbreaking for me, seeing some of the attitude of this new administration to just rip and run out of certain things. Because
we went with Ukraine, or
well, even with NATO and with some of these other components that are extremely vital to global security, right? Like America's involvement in NATO is super important. Now, I know that it might not be where like it's difficult because we're putting in a lot of money as U.S. citizens to back that, but it's really important because what it does is we're the voice that brings the people to the table, right? And if you want to lead, you don't lead by walking away from the table. You lead by bringing people to a table and driving conversation.
But is it not like, so you saw like the Pete Hegseth leaked text, right, with Tim and JD Vance? I mean, I'm skeptical that was leaked, right? Unintentionally. I'm sure it was.
I haven't actually had a chance to fully understand it. I don't
blown out of proportion
because I've been traveling so much.
I haven't got my phone on me, otherwise I'd show you.
Oh.
It's basically just saying Europe needs to step up, and we're sick of paying for them.
Yeah,
but I get it.
Yeah, but also too, so let's be honest. Some of this is because Europe has been raped and pillaged by American big tech companies for decades now, and who's there to hold that accountable, right? And it has been. There should have been hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested into Europe from these companies that have gained from Europe, and they did not make the required by law investment.
You could have given Europe the money. You could have given them the hundreds of billions of dollars.
Well, it's not giving them money. You're supposed to take this money and build infrastructure, which then builds jobs, which then creates economic stimulus, right? So if you let's say you build a data center, right? You're not just building a data center. You're employing people, right? You're employing the designers, you're employing the HVAC systems, you're the guys who do the HVAC, you're deploying construction workers, concrete guys. There's a whole range of different work groups that you're going to need to build a data center. Now, each one of them are going to have a different, they're all going to have a different job. So now all of a sudden you're creating more economic value just for the fact that these people have jobs. Then the next thing is well, now that they're making all this money, they're going to spend it, right? And they might go buy some Dior, or they might go, buy some stuff, which
Louis
most
Vuitton,
Europeans do. Yeah. I mean, then they protest with Dior on.
But that's the thing, though, right? And I think that's one thing. Like Jan, you say to me, man, there's a lot of money in Europe. It's like, no, and I was completely wrong. There's a lot of money in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think the investment has been there. I do disagree with you about that, and I'll tell you what. So I'll tell you what.
The American investment has not. As someone who I actively talk with the countries, so at the actual European Commission level, I engage at the European Commission level with leadership there. The investment that is required by law of American companies that are operating in Europe has not been met.
But what about the European? Right, the European government's investing back into Europe because it feels like that's been neglected as well.
Sure, but again, if they don't have the tax power, if they don't have the economic stimulus that is supposed to be driven by the companies that are operating within their country because they're being pillaged, it's going to be a whole lot harder to do that because they're not going to have the economic power to do it because they're literally are being starved. Because value is coming out and no value is coming in.
So, in your mind, where should Europe go from here?
Well,
and the UK. Well, when I talk about Europe, I mean the UK as well.
The UK is harder for me because they kind of just push themselves off onto an island, and it's just
the UK's in
yeah,
serious trouble.
yeah.
I
And
think,
I love the UK. Some of my favorite memories of traveling have been, up in Manchester and what have you. Um, but really, they cut themselves off from this market,
yeah,
and it makes like for me, like as a someone who's building a business, I have to capture the bigger market where
sure.
I have the greater chance of catching a fish, and then one day I can go play around with the little net to catch tadpoles in the UK, right?
Sure.
Um,
I spoke with the powers that be there about creating 250,000 jobs, right? By 2027. I think it was over like a 8-year period. We're like,
yeah,
look, we think we can create 250,000 jobs.
yeah,
The financial services industry doesn't have to submit.
yeah,
I mean, I think now it's too late, if I'm honest. I
yeah,
think New Yorkers won,
yeah,
right? It's beaten London. But they weren't interested. One politician said to me, they were like, employment, sorry, is at like 97%.
hmm
I was like, yeah, but what's the point of having a job if it doesn't pay you enough to live? And they just weren't interested, whereas I think Europe has to wake up, and Europe has to wake up very fast.
yeah. Look, I don't disagree with you on that fact, right? There are a couple of things that can be done. Um, I think that Europe and Europeans in general need to be more selective of the products they use, the people they choose to do business with. And I know they're already really selective, but they need to require or demand of the products they use, the people they do business with, that there is a fair investment in their culture or in their economy, right? So, like for example, for me, if I go and I decide I'm going to do business in France, right? Well, if I'm going to do business in France and I'm going to store customer data from that are French customers, I'm going to need servers in France. Now, if I was to do it any other way, that's raping and pillaging the country. It
Sure.
really is because
Yeah.
you're just pulling the data out of there.
Yeah.
You're exfilling the data.
Yeah.
But I have to make the investment in the servers in France, and I have to make the investment in the French economy in order to make sure that they have the right manpower to be able to help me in my next stages of maybe I have an office there one day. Well, if I have an office there, well, how do we make sure that the people who work in that office have the right training and have the right education, right? So there's a whole ancillary side to doing global business, which is actually economy building. And that's something that's been kind of attractive in Malta has been, being able to help, right, by creating jobs, bringing in talent, which then results in tax revenue, which then results in all these other things that are ancillary to having an office and just hiring people.
I've been speaking to one of the big tech companies, trying to convince them to build servers in the Rock.
Yeah,
You're going
in
to
the
see it
rock.
tomorrow. Yeah, in
Yeah,
the Rock.
that's crazy.
They've actually I think they've got perfect conditions, and it's actually hollow inside. You'll see it tomorrow,
Wow.
right? But it's
Wow.
I think it's something like 30 miles, right,
Wow.
of tunnels inside there.
Yeah,
And I look at it and I'm just like, this is retail space. You could just get one of the big tech companies, and all of a sudden, it puts Gibraltar on the map with that.
yeah,
And like you're saying, all of a sudden, Gibraltar's a powerhouse.
yeah. And you can't do it from the top down. And all of these issues, when it comes to the economy and economic growth, it's really from the bottom up, right? So it has to be from the investments being made. And literally, Europe has laws requiring that data doesn't leave a country for this exact reason. That's why it's the way it is. And when people in America are like, "Oh, well, Europe has the worst data privacy laws in the world. It's so difficult," or whatever. Well, they're not actually complaining about the law itself because they probably deep down wish that we had laws like that. They're complaining because they can't rape and pillage more, and that's the indicator.
Yeah. I get the capitalistic angle, but America's given a lot to the world. A hell of a
Oh,
lot.
we always do, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah,
But there's resources that have to be gained in order to do that, right?
Sure.
So let's. I'm just kind of laying the facts out.
No.
This is
I
what
get it, and
happens.
I don't know where it comes from, but I'm, maybe it's because I only ever work for American companies.
Yeah.
Um, but I get it, and I don't know where it comes from, but I'm, maybe it's because I only ever work for American companies. Yeah. Maybe it's because I only ever work for American companies. Maybe it's because I only ever work for American companies. I've always been a bit biased, and I know I'm biased. I don't know why I'm biased, but I've always been like biased towards America.
Yeah. Well, I wish that I was giving you an opinion, because I'm really not giving you an opinion. I'm giving you a matter of fact based on the laws in Europe and the way that those laws are translated into action, and the way that other big tech companies are not following the law. And
But will they? Like, is this something that you're now seeing this like change?
no, I'm not. I'm
Right.
actually seeing the opposite. So like I'm seeing where, like, when you just saw it with X, where they built a massive computing center in Texas and in Tennessee, right? And literally it says on the terms of service, we're going to export your data to Texas and Tennessee. And so even if you're in Europe, or even if you're in, any other part of the world, your data is going to Texas or Tennessee to be able to train Grok. And that by itself is illegal, because what should be happening is there should be a data center in France, there should be a data center in Gibraltar, there should be a data center in Germany, anywhere they want to operate.
Again, I've spoken like to the Europeans. They don't. They either don't care or they don't get it. But in my head, and again, maybe I'm wrong.
No, the law, they do get it. The law exists for this reason.
But
so
then why
it's
aren't they
by
building
law. No, it's not the Europeans that aren't building it. It's that the companies are stealing the data and not building like they're supposed to by law. It's not the Europeans at all. This has zero to do with the Europeans. This has everything to do with you having American companies that come in, take the data, and send it off to Tennessee, right? So as a result of that, you're not having that investment of the American company, which by law is required to come to these countries and build that data center. But it's not happening now. And so, that's not a European problem. That's the laws in Europe are there to entice the American to build those data centers in the individual countries. And that's what they should be doing and should have been doing for the last 15, 20 years, because what that does is it sparks the economy. It allows for Europe to be more competitive in compute, right? So they wouldn't have this problem of having a lack of compute for training models today. But instead now, Europe has been kind of resource constrained on compute and on data centers and on all these other things that are all ancillary. And it's all because the actual laws in Europe are not being followed by big tech. And that's why you keep hearing about these big fines where they're, every like couple months it's like $1 billion fine, $2 billion fine, whatever.
Do they pay the fines, do you reckon? Is it like cash? You reckon they
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
they
they
write
do.
a check and they just pay it?
Yeah, but they're making so much money that's like a speeding ticket to them. And I say speeding ticket because they're moving so fast, because they're just ignoring the law rather than doing the right thing. So they're just like, you know what, we're going to make so much money doing this, then there's no point in even obeying the law, because we could just pay it off with a parking ticket.
Do you know what the problem is? I think Europeans and Brits have become so cynical about their own governments. Like they kind of look at it and go, do you know what? It can't be any worse than what our own governments are doing to us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I just don't think it has anything to do with the actual
No, I
governments.
get it.
I think that you also have to remember that each individual country government is different than the European Union, right? So
Sure.
the European Union as a whole knows that this is a problem,
Yeah.
and it's been a persistent problem for quite a while, and that's where you're seeing a lot of this anti-American big tech pushback over here, because this is becoming more and more and more
Media
of a problem.
is like hammering America right
Yeah,
now.
I know, and it's sad for me because, like, look, I can speak very critical of certain things, but I'm an American through and through, and I love my country, and I love the people of America, and I love our armed forces, I love our Marines, but there's things that we always need to be doing to make things better for our homeland. So, and I'm very hopeful that things are going to be changing more, and I can't wait to see what really happens with that.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's tons of positives, but you're right.
Yeah.
Like, no country, no one is like perfect or innocent.
Yeah.
Dominick Romano, we are coming up to 2 hours, man.
2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours.
We made it.
At least I could go another 2 hours.
Yeah,
but
probably could.
yeah, exactly. There's always tomorrow, but yeah, honestly, thank you for flying out here.
Thanks for having me.
Like honestly, like
This is
there's
fun.
a whole country here.
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity here, and would love to learn more about what it is you're doing, and like with other countries, and hopefully you can help us here as well.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
awesome, cool.
Right.
Well,
Thanks
look,
for
we'll get you
having
guys
me.
soon. Thank you, man. Great to see you.